Hello, hello, everyone. So today we have our guest. Let me just go back to the guest layouts just so you can see. Hold on. And to remind you that this is an opportunity. If you'd like to highlight your brand, you can always sponsor an episode. So now let me bring on our guest because I'm super excited for you to all meet Tiffany. So Tiffany, tell us a little bit about you, your company, TJM Co Media Boutique, and then we'll get into like the Q&A and conversation. Oh, hold on a second. Hold on.
Uh-oh, can you not hear me? Oh, there you go. All right. I was smiling because I'm like, look at this. LJ's got it all professional. It's all done. I'm so excited. So yes, I am Tiffany Joy Murchison of TJM Co Media Boutique. We are a boutique public relations firm in Brooklyn. We work with nonprofit organizations, government entities, purpose-centered small businesses to help them build their brand and maintain a positive reputation and a positive public image. We are where public relations meets purpose. That's our tagline, because all the work that we do is purposeful and centered around making someone else's life a little bit better, and something that we can actually realize and put a finger on. So that's it.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. So one of the things that most people don't know is Tiffany and I are in class together, and we are part of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, and they are taking applications. So you should apply. You can check out the link. It's on our bios. But it's a worthwhile program because we get to explore different ways to expand our business. So Tiffany, one of the things I think that most business owners or people that are in business are not clear about is just the definition of PR. We talk about this all of the time, but I really feel like, there's this sensationalized version of it, and then there's the actual definition of what happened. So tell us, as PR expert, what do people need to know? What is PR?
Okay, so PR is not just Chris Brown gets in trouble or R. Kelly gets in trouble and somebody comes to save the day. That's what most people hear. They think of PR and they think of celebrity status and some foolishness that somebody does and they wiggle their way out of it. Public relations, by definition, is how you manage your relationship with your publics. And that is whether you're in business, whether you are a celebrity, an athlete, a spokesperson, a political candidate, you always need to be mindful of the relationship you have with your public, which is built on the reputation. What people need to know is that even if you're not intentional, you are engaging in PR every single day. What you wear, how you speak, where you hang out, how you spend your time, what you give your time and treasury and talent to, all of that gives the people around you an impression of who you are. So your story is being told whether you know it or not. PR is the difference between whether you're telling it or someone else is telling it for you.
So I think that's very powerful for those that are listening that are actually working in, still like they're not entrepreneurs, but they're working in corporate America. We also have a brand ourselves. So tell us more about our own personal PR and the work that we can do to maintain our presence without necessarily hiring a person, but the work we can do internally.
So internally, the first thing I would tell you is learn how to read the room, right? I, for one, knew that, and I've had a long career in corporate America, being a former nail tech many, many lives ago, that was something that was always fun for me, but I knew I couldn't do that in corporate America. So even little nuances like that in this virtual world where everybody's on Zoom, what your background is like impacts your personal brand. If you get on a Zoom and I can see the laundry in the back and the clothes and it's disheveled, automatically, subconsciously, I'm thinking, oh, this person's not organized. I don't know if I can give them this project. I don't know if they're going to manage this well, right? So you should be authentically you, but you don't bring your whole self to every situation. And you have to learn how to read the room and know the behavior, how the behavior is going to be received. And that takes a little bit of nuance and some wisdom, but it's definitely something that the minute you enter the workspace, even prior to that, high school, college, you need to start looking at how you're perceived.
I think about this, the conversation you're having around managing your personal brand. A lot of people may not have ever experienced the room. Like they may have had their entire career online, or they've just transitioned from college online. Now they're in workplace, remote work spaces. So do we read squares now? So like when you're thinking about how to
Yes.
manage our personal brands, because we'll go into the business in a moment, but how do we manage our personal brands when all we really have is this little square?
Know who's going to be on that Zoom meeting with you and do your homework, right? You can look at a person. Before we meet a client, we do what we call a dossier. You can do a dossier on anybody that you have to interact with. Go online, look at their social media. Are they super conservative, or do they look like they're having a whole lot of fun? Do they have children? Are they a parent? Are they married? Are they single? What are their hobbies? Do they play golf? Do they, skateboard? Are they jet skiing? Are they jumping out of airplanes? All of those things tell you a little bit about a person's personality. And if there's someone who has maybe had some speaking engagements or some interviews, watch a few snippets of it. Get to know who that person is in the room. Then you know whether or not you need to be a little bit more reserved or conservative, or whether you can maybe tell the joke that you were thinking of telling. That's because we're still in rooms, even though they're virtual, we're still in rooms. So you got to get to know who's there. And then as we transition to the people that we see in the squares, Hollywood squares, like the game, and we start to now go back outside and be in these spaces, in person, you really need to pay attention to that as well. But either way, virtual or in person, you're still in a room. There's still a room to be read.
So thank you for that. Let's dig deeper though into TJM Co. So you mentioned that you were in corporate America and you made the transition to become an entrepreneur and run your own PR firm. And so tell us more about your journey from corporate to entrepreneurship.
I tell everybody this was all God. He kicked me out of corporate America 3 times because I am so hard-headed that I would not listen the first or the second time. It took 3 times. I did not jump. I was pushed. And it was quick. I, worked someplace 15 years, built a career there, invested in my community, had my children, and then got laid off from that, stayed home a little while, traveled, then went back into the workforce and financial services. Hurricane Sandy hit New York, last one in, first one out, got laid off again. Then one of my mentors called and said, hey, I got a promotion and I'm building a new team. Will you come back as a contractor? And I said, okay. And during that time, I had started the business. I got the LLC and all that kind of stuff, but I really hadn't done anything. And he said, can you come back? And contractor money looks really good. And I remember saying, all right, God, I'll go back for 6 months just so I could save up some money, just so I can stack some money. And that 6 months turned into almost 2 years. And I think God was just like, okay, you're not listening. And then they ended my contract. And I remember sitting down with my sisters. We take a trip every year, and this was our first one, actually. And I said, sometime in December, I won't have a job at the end of January, and I don't think I'm going back. And one of my older sisters looked at me and said, okay, well, if anybody can do it, you can. And if you need support, we got you, which was totally not what I expected that sister to say. So third Friday of January was my last day in corporate America. I remember that last ride in the elevator. I went to IKEA over the weekend and bought some furniture from the as-is department, turned my basement into an office space, got some interns from New York City's Youth and Community Development Department. And that Monday, TJM Co was born. We just started from there.
I love it. I love it. And, when I think about the work that you're doing with brands, talk to us about like your process for identifying the brands that you work with.
One of the things that's really important to us is that their work is not superficial. We look for nonprofit organizations and corporate brands who really honestly want to do the work in the community. At the end of the day, we want to see that we've had an impact that's tangible, that we can actually not only just quantify, but qualify. And so we look, especially in terms of youth. So a lot of the nonprofits we work with are youth-based nonprofits, from teen pregnancy to teen parenting to teaching STEM and coding to children in underserved communities. Those are the spaces where we see our impact come to life, right? Those are the stories that don't get told often. And then when they do, sometimes are misconstrued. And so that's why those things are important to us. There are some things that we don't touch. We don't work with celebrities primarily. We've done some in the past, but that's not really our sweet spot. We've worked with some governmental agencies and housing and paid leave campaigns, things of that nature. And those are the things that really allow me to sleep at night, to know that I'm making a difference in more ways than one. And so my whole team is the same way. We have a very diverse team, but everybody is really toes down in making sure that we make an impact that's positive, that we're not just making a dollar. And on the flip side of that, the way that we work internally and the benefits we provide kind of speak to the same thing. I got a job in corporate America, very young, 19 years old, stayed there 15 years, and I was able to build not just a career and a life. I didn't just have a job. I had a 401k plan and was able to really start building wealth for myself. And that's something that we try to give our employees an opportunity to do as well. And it makes them just more committed to the work that we do.
Absolutely. And I truly believe in investing in the youth and using the Summer Youth Employee Program, Department of Youth and Community Development. And for anyone listening, I'm a huge advocate of that program, because while the kids don't necessarily have workplace skills, you'd be teaching them and you'd be molding them. And your workplace can be what they start their career understanding and knowing. So make it a positive experience, and they can be very positive about what work looks like for them and their future. So I love that. I love that. One of the things that we have to dig into. So talk to me about integrated PR and marketing. And I say this because what people don't realize is that a lot of the things we see are because of someone in public relations making us see it. And even it's not always as clear, because you're literally behind the scenes puppet mastering, making sure that things are placed and positioned and everywhere, so that we receive information in a way that makes sense, that we can digest it, that we walk away with what it is that you wanted us to understand. I think people quite get, like, you watch TV, but you don't really think about how much work has gone into that ad or that television spot or that newspaper article. So talk to us more about what is it, this integrated component?
So anybody who's a marketer that's listening is probably, if they could throw eggs or tomatoes at me right now, they would, because most people will tell you that marketing is the overarching theme and that advertising and PR fall under that. I disagree. I disagree that it should at least be different. So let the record show. And I think this is going to start to come out as time goes on, that PR actually needs to be the overarching umbrella. And the reason I say that is because as publicists, we have the gift of interpretation. We can, because PR is a social science, we study behaviors, we can sometimes better speak to how something is going to relate to a particular audience. And make that a little bit more targeted. I'll give you an example of where PR wasn't really considered. And that's, if everybody, was aware of the Dove commercial recently, where they had the women taking their shirts off. And it started out with a dark-skinned woman. And as you went along, the women got fairer skinned and fairer skinned and fairer skinned. And the community took that to mean, and it kind of did look this way, like the cleaner you are, the lighter you get. They didn't consider the PR spin on that. Or H&M got in trouble twice not too long ago. One commercial had a little black boy, and his t-shirt said "coolest monkey in the jungle." Well, that went over well in the UK, but not in the US. That's what happens when you have marketing and advertising and no PR, because the PR team would have been able to say, hold on a second, there's a different relationship with racism in the UK than in the US. So while this might work in London, this is not going to work in Brooklyn. And, so that's where PR comes in. There are a lot of strategies that go into making sure that a brand stays relevant. It's not just building the image, making sure you stay relevant, making sure that the things that you do are told in a way that is newsworthy, connecting you to partnerships, sponsorship opportunities. People don't want to give you money if your reputation isn't good. People don't want to give you money if you don't seem like you're the latest trend or that you're relevant. We live in a cancel culture. You say one thing wrong, and this Gen Z population is ready, like off with your head. So it's really important that you not only are telling your story, but understand how it's being received. And I say we have the gift of interpretation. We make sure that we convey the messages without losing the content. It's what we say it in a way. Consider us Rihanna's ASL interpreter from the Super Bowl. That's what we do. We make sure that we tell your message without losing the oomph, but in a way that it can be understood by the various audiences that you want to speak to.
And I think that that's important for brands to understand that sometimes your vision for your brand also needs to be communicated by someone outside of your brand to make sure that everyone is receiving what you expect to be communicated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's another challenge that I often see where brands, when they're considering securing PR and marketing, they're only looking at the ability to influence social media. So what are some of like the measures that a brand should be thinking about when it comes time to hire PR? Because I think that someone looks at PR and they think, all right, I need to get more views. I need to get more likes. I need to get more shares. So I'm going to hire a PR agent to do that. And it's not transactional in that way. So tell us more about like why that is misguided.
So likes don't necessarily equate to money. Neither do sharing doesn't equate to dollars. I'll give another real world example. Bobbi Brown Cosmetics. I can't remember the name of the model, but they hired a model as an influencer and paid her all this money because she had all these millions of followers. And after 6 months or so of the campaign, their makeup sales didn't move. The needle didn't move at all. When you peel back the onion, the reason being is that those million followers, 85 to 90% of them were men who were following her because she was a beautiful woman and would post pictures in her bikini or in her bathing suit and all that kind of stuff. Well, men aren't buying makeup. Yeah. So you have to, again, peel back the layers to do the analytics, to look at really what's going on underneath and see if something is worthwhile or not. Social media is not PR. It's a tactic that can be used in PR, but it's not PR because there's no guarantee dollar for dollar, like for dollar. The other thing is, how many times have Instagram gone down over the last 12 months? If you don't have anything else but your social media, if Instagram goes away, then you have no brand. If you are solely depending on social media, Instagram to build your brand, if you don't have a website, if you don't have press hits, if you don't have anything out there that someone can Google and see you, when you lose Instagram, then what happens? Your brand just poof, be gone. So you really want to build a complete traditional and digital PR footprint so that you have stability. It's like building a house on brick versus building a house with sand.
I love this. And so, you're the queen of dropping gems and of wisdom. So you also wrote a book for individuals to help learn, like for individuals of companies, brands, to learn how to manage their own PR. So tell us more about the book that you wrote and why you wrote it.
Again, a challenge, right? So I keep getting pushed. My mentor, shout out to Angie Collins, my mentor and really, really good friend who has been in this PR game for 30 plus years, said to me, I want you to write a book. I want you to write a book for small businesses. You have 2 weeks to do it. And then I want you to teach a workshop around the book. And I was like, is she crazy? 2 weeks? But I'm always up for a good challenge. So the first edition of PRY Until was done in 2 weeks, and we did have a workshop around it. What I realized actually in writing the book, I was tired. Like, do we really do all of these things? I had to try to condense all the work we do into bite-sized pieces, digestible pieces that a small business owner could actually realistically take on without taking away from their full-time job, right? Because if you're a baker, you're not a publicist. You need to bake. You're not doing PR. And so I did that. Fast forward, the pandemic happened, George Floyd. People started to ask us publicists of color how they could still engage during that time. how they could promote their brand without appearing to be insensitive to the climate. And so that then sparked the second edition of PRY Until, and it stands for Public Relations for Yourself Until You're Ready to Hire a Pro. I never tell a business owner to plan on doing their own PR for the long haul. You may want to give yourself 6 months or a year, but eventually you need to turn that over to someone who that's their full-time job so you can focus on your business. And LJ, we're learning that in the Goldman Sachs program, how important it is for us to stay high level and delegate, right? So you don't want to try to become your own social media manager, publicist, and all that stuff. But to get you started, this book is a great reference guide, and you should set aside time, 6 months, a year, to start developing your processes, and then say, okay, I'm going to put aside the budget to actually hire somebody to continue this. The other thing that you'll get out of the book is how to be sensitive, how to have a personal touch to the things that you do. The pandemic taught us that we really don't want to be isolated. People were clamoring to get back out, right? Nobody wants to, I don't like people. Nobody likes people until we're forced to not be with people, right? And then it's like, you can't tell me to not be with people. So we have gotten back to where a personal touch means a whole lot more, a handwritten note. And so you'll see some of my favorite vendors in the book, some places you can get some cool stationery, some great graphic designers, some great marketers that I work with, but really just how to add a personal touch, because that really does go a long way. My mother used to say a little bit of extra effort goes a long, long way. And I found that in business and in PR, that is really, really true. So, how to not be insensitive, and the climate hasn't changed. We're still in a very volatile social, economic, political climate. And so you want to make sure that you are not being misconstrued or insensitive.
Right. And I think, one of the things that you're talking about is very important for these larger brands that are trying to still promote in communities that are struggling with different issues, whether it's like LGBTQIA rights, or whether it is just racism in general, or social economic, just all kinds of discrimination. But one of the things that I also know that you said, so two questions. One, you mentioned one about brands knowing that they should hand over the PR. Is there a specific time or thing or like milestone that people should be thinking of, like, wow, I've got X, Y, and Z? Let me
budget.
Budget.
That's the first thing, is budget. But the other thing is, when you see that you're starting to spend too much time on the PR side of it and not enough time on your business, it should be an 80-20 rule, right? Or 70-30 rule. You should be spending 70 to 80% in your own business, doing what you do, right? I'm a big component. You'll hear me say it all the time, mind your own business, in more ways than one, right? So you should be minding the business that you have. You can't do that if you're trying to do something that's for me to do. So when you realize that it becomes too much, when that scale starts to tip just a little bit and you're spending 40, 50% of your time on social, trying to talk to journalists, that's the time that you need to hire somebody. And it doesn't, PR is a cost, right? However, there are ways to work through that. Sometimes you can barter. If you have a service, you may be able to barter with a newer publicist, a freelance publicist, for something that they may need. Maybe you're an accountant, they need accounting services, you can barter a few hours a month. When I first started out, I did that. I wanted Spanish lessons, so I bartered with someone who taught Spanish. Or you can, get somebody that's out of college, that needs to build a portfolio. So there are less expensive ways to do it. I would just say, if you're going to do that, make sure that that person has a mentor or somebody that they can, kind of check the box against and say, is this right? Is this right? And that person can guide them and say yes, so that you don't have any, hiccups or mishaps. But when that scale starts to tip and you're spending way more time and it looks like you're decreasing what you do for real and you're picking up too much PR, then it's time to definitely hire someone else.
And if you had to choose between hiring the PR person or the marketing person, who are we picking first?
The PR person.
Okay. All right. I mean, you might be biased in that statement, but
I am. But we always say it's real easy for a publicist to transition into the marketing side. And I'm proof of that. It's not the same way. The brain doesn't function the same way. One of my best friends and colleagues is a marketer. And he's taught me a lot. And so, we do PR, we do digital marketing as well. But I don't think he could come in and do what we do.
Okay. Okay. Look, pat yourself on the shoulder because that is why we're here and that is why you are amplifying your brand. Now, two more questions. One is, what does an educated consumer look like? Like, who do you like to work with and what should people know before engaging or approaching you for business opportunities?
Okay, an educated consumer, educated client knows that nothing happens overnight. Even the overnight sensations, that really didn't happen overnight. We just don't see the blood, sweat, and tears that got them there. So nothing happens overnight. It takes anywhere between 4 months to 8 months to see to realize the impact of a PR campaign for the most part. Sometimes there are things that you have that are just so story worthy and newsworthy that they'll get covered right away. But it takes time to actually build a brand. We build media kits, we do research. It's not a fly by night thing. So that's one. The other thing is, if you are a nonprofit or a larger business, even some of the small businesses, you don't want to be the one or the only person responsible for liaising with us. You want to have somebody else that kind of is part of what they do. So even if it's your executive assistant or admin, if you're a nonprofit, you should have a communications person that deals with your PR, your marketing, your external affairs, things like that. It's a lot easier for us when we have a constant flow of information. PR is a partnership. It is not, we can't make it up. You have to give us the information and then we'll do what we do. We make it do what we do, but you have to give it to us. So we need you to give us the data. We need to know what you have going on in your business. We need to know if you have a new partnership, if you have something that could become a crisis situation, we need to know that ASAP. I tell folks, just like your attorney, tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because I can't protect your brand if I don't know that. And I've had situations like that where people haven't always told us the truth. And then later on, we're like, we could have done something different. We could have done this. We could have done that. So if you tell us, we can protect you as best as possible. I am a big proponent for telling on yourself before somebody else tells on you. Another lesson I learned as a little girl from my mama. I always got in less trouble if I was upfront. And the same holds true. People are people. And PR is the study of people. So that's what you need to do. You need to be upfront and honest and give us all the information we need.
Okay. Now, we have like 3 minutes left. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you work with HBCUs and PWIs around helping to manage their brand. And what I find is that not enough educational institutions have been intentional, but yet they're always struggling with reputation. They're struggling with enrollment. They're struggling with attracting sponsors and with even with their endowments. And so talk to us about more. Let's talk more about the predominantly white institutions that you work with and some of the brand management that you've been focused on, because maybe they're not necessarily always aware. And that, that is part of the conversation of why PR is a tool for correcting, amplifying, and addressing gaps that instead of reacting, you're proactive. So talk to us about how your brand is working with PWIs.
You said it, it's awareness, right? Especially when you get to those institutions that are very insular, they really don't know how to communicate outside of their own spaces. And that can be a challenge. They're not aware of what's offensive. Nobody's doing the work in the DEI space for them that's honest enough, right? And so that's why you want to go outside, because you avoid groupthink. Everybody usually is drinking the same Kool-Aid. And as we've seen in the news, Purdue University chancellor was in trouble not too long ago for mocking what he thought was an Asian language. He thought it was a joke, and it didn't go over well with anybody, not the student body, not, the Asian population, none of that, especially in this time of, stop Asian hate. That was the worst thing that he could have done. And it's just an awareness. People tend to live in their little bubbles, very insular. I think it was no coincidence that the situation, the murder of George Floyd, happened during COVID while we were all sitting still, because it made people have to pay attention. And what PWIs need to understand, and HBCUs as well, is that everybody is now paying attention. We were shaken up out of our sleep. If you weren't awake, you're awake now, because we all sat, we had no other choice but to see, unless you just turned the TV off, it was everywhere. And it's not over. That awareness is not going away. And so the work that we do with universities and colleges, especially in the PWI space, is just making them aware of what is offensive and what's not offensive, and language that's okay to use and language that isn't okay to use. They just don't get it. A lot of times it's not a bad person or racist or the wrong attitude. Sometimes we walk into a room and I'm the first Black person that they've actually ever had a full conversation with, because that's just not the space that they live in. And so they don't know what's offensive. And I'd rather them ask me the questions like, can I say colored? No. Can I say the N-word? No, right? I'd rather them ask those questions of me, and let's get it all out on the table. We have really candid, straightforward, hard conversations with our clients right off the bat. Let's get it all out on the table. Let's get all the biases out. Let's understand who this is really about. It's not about you. Let's really get everything out on the table. And I think that's the thing that we bring that's the most helpful, is that we avoid the groupthink. We're not drinking the Kool-Aid, and we're ready to have those hard conversations without the emotion in it. We can have those conversations and walk away still professional and with a goal in mind.
Absolutely. So my computer is slowing down a little bit, but we are almost at the end, or actually we're at the end. If you had to leave 3 gems for people to think about as they're managing their brands, what would that be?
The first one that I said, read the room, be authentically you, but don't bring your whole self everywhere you go. Everybody doesn't need to know you that way. Familiarity breeds contempt. The second thing I would say is always take accountability. Accountability is not easy, but it gives you the authority to make a change. And the third one I would say is, when in doubt, hire TJM Co.
Okay, thank you, thank you. My camera went out because that's what happens with technology, but we are at the end of this. So thank you, Tiffany, for joining us on today's episode of Any Given Monday.
Thank you so much for having me.